Hello there. Now on the last video I was talking about the importance of exploring the artistic side of photography, and every time I talk about that I get a lot of comments back, mostly positive, but then some stating that they feel art or the creation of art is purely for ourselves. Now I think that's an interesting statement, and it's ideal, yes, but I'm not sure we're being entirely honest with ourselves. I come across a lot of photographers who don't show or share their work, and I completely understand why, because it can be brutal out there. But it's something I always try to encourage in people, because when they do it, particularly in a safe learning environment, I find almost everybody enjoys it and they always get a lot out of the experience. Personally, I think art is a form of communication. Through our work, we are communicating an idea, a story, a perspective of life that can only come from you. The thing is, the whole point of communication is to interact with another person. Say if we're talking to a person, we want that person to listen to us. And if they're not, we will often just give up. I feel exactly the same about my photography. I want people to see the work that I'm creating. I want them to enjoy it. I want them to hear the story I'm trying to tell. Whether they are really listening or not, or whether they like my work or not, I think is a slightly different thing. To me, having just one person interested in the work I'm creating is enough for me to continue to create. And it's the rule of one, isn't it? If one person likes what you're doing, then you can be almost guaranteed that other people will like it too. When I first started this YouTube channel, I wanted it to be as transparent as possible. I decided I was going to share everything, show you everything virtually that I create. And I've shared a lot about myself as well, bar a few personal details, and I feel I've achieved that over time. And through that time, the channel has built slowly but surely. It's been an amazing experience, and there's been none of the shenanigans like buying likes, viewers, subscribers, that kind of thing that happens all too frequently. Building trust with you was and still is the highest priority to me with this channel. I get it though, I understand why people cheat, because wanting to be liked is a very natural human instinct, and there's not really anything to be ashamed of it either. I sit in this sort of strange place in the middle where I want to be liked, but at the same time, I really don't care what people think of me. And that sort of empowers me to some extent to just put my work out into the world. Now, on the whole, I think social media is a good thing, a place where we often share our work. It obviously has its problems, but I believe deep down that the good will out, and I think that's the same with social media. One of the problems, though, is that the way the ecosystem is built, it's so heavily focused on the numbers. People tie up their emotional being with the numbers, likes and comments and subscribers, all that kind of thing. And I think that's part of the reason that we get these reported stories of such mass depression of a lot of people that are heavily into social media. And that's not something we really want to chase as we're putting our work out there. It's because of this that people then try to cheat the system. And there's one thing I know for certain, that if there is the opportunity to get away with something, the opportunity to gain an advantage without getting caught, then for a lot of people, the temptation is just going to be too great not to take that. With that in mind though, I recently got thinking about how this affects the creation of our landscape photography and our nature photography, particularly with the creation of the images themselves. Now, landscape photography is not a documentary. We're not creating a factual representation of the scene we have in front of us. When I do my landscape photography, when I take the picture and when I do the post-processing, I'm just trying to create a combination of what I saw on the day to how I felt at the time, how I perceived that landscape. That's where the art comes in, I think. So that might result in some things being different for different people, because particularly we perceive colour in a different way. So when I saw a scene, it might feel very vibrant and saturated, so I'll up the saturation a little bit in post-production. Sometimes I might remove a little bit of saturation, sometimes I might take the colour out altogether or tweak the greens, things like that that show how I perceive that scene. There are so many things we can do in post-production, and they're all very exciting. But for me, it's about intent. I don't want to be deceived by a photographer when I'm looking at an image. And with my post-processing particularly, I don't want to deceive the viewer that's looking at my work. Now, I'm not really offering any answers here, but there are some really interesting questions about what is cheating and what is the landscape photography deception. It's often a very fine line, and a lot of people will say there's no such thing as cheating in photography. And to some extent, I do agree with that. But like I say, I think it's about the intent of the photographer. So take this example here. I've added drama to this image with that sort of filmic, hyper-realistic look using my bad weather preset. Now I love this look, but there's absolutely no intent to deceive the viewer whatsoever. Everybody knows that this is not real. This is not what I saw with my eyes, because life's not like that. Things don't look like that. But it's like pantomime or wrestling. We're all in on it. We're all in on the fact that this look is not real, and therefore there is no deception. It's the same with some of the stunning composites that you see. Really creative things, like where you might see the Eiffel Tower in the middle of the desert, or a beach ball replaces the sun. They're absolutely brilliant composites that don't pretend to be anything else. It's the same with these absolutely stunning images that you see, where a photographer has gone out to a location, they'll take a really nice sunset shot, and then they'll wait for sort of 5 or 6 hours until the middle of the night with the camera in exactly the same position, and then take a nightscape image and combine them later on in post-production to create these really creative, interesting images, but that we all know are not real. But again, there's no deception. So it's a really enjoyable, beautiful image to look at. Now, the problem I have is when the photographer intentionally tries to deceive the viewer. So swapping a cloudy sky for a beautiful sunset sky, or moving posts or a post around in the image or something, or cloning big parts of the image without telling the viewer and making that obvious that that's what you've done. Yes, if you are not showing anybody, it's absolutely fine. But as soon as someone sees that work and you don't say anything, then you are essentially deceiving the viewer at that point. It's not just the post-production side of things either. There are a lot of issues with wildlife photography around the baiting of animals. Now, it's a very hot topic. People have very varied opinions on it. Personally, I'm not 100% sure. I do, though, feel there's a difference between putting some seeds out for birds in your garden to baiting bears and wolves, where you're dragging them miles and miles away from where they naturally might go, just so a photographer can get a picture of them. It's an issue I really need to know and do a bit more research about before I make my final offer, before I form my final opinion. Regardless, a wildlife image will speak a bit less to me if I find out that the animal has been baited. This image here is one of my favourite all-time wildlife images. It's by my good friend Lyle McAlmont, and it's of a sea otter on the Isle of Mull. Now, I know that this is a very natural image. We were there together in the Isle of Mull, and I've made a video about it as well. And we put a lot of work in. We've searched for this otter for a long, long time. And the lengths that Lyle went to get this image, which included lying on the sand as the tide came over the top of him and he got very wet in order to get this image. There's just something very different about an image of an otter in the wild landscape like this as there is to take a picture of an otter in a zoo. That's certainly how I feel, at least. Now, like I said, I think it is a very fine line, and that's particularly the case with landscape photography. And I just wanted to show a couple of examples, pictures that I've taken on my latest tour in the Lake District. But I think overall, most people, and it's true for a lot of competitions as well, that people don't have a problem with spot removal. You probably sometimes need to remove spots that have been a result of things on your lens or on your sensor, or it might be the case that you need to just spot remove something small in the scene that you couldn't get to or remove. I think most people don't have a problem with that. Still, it is a fine line. So take a look at this image here. I'm really happy with this image, but I think it is slap bang on the line of what's deceiving the viewer and what isn't. So in this scene, I initially composed it with a rock because there was ducks swimming about, and I wanted to get the duck kind of at the other side of the image to balance it out with the rock, but the duck wasn't playing ball. So eventually, because I didn't have time, because I was trying to look after the clients that I was with, I didn't manage to recompose. So instead, I've just cloned the rock out, or spot removed the rock. Now, it is albeit a very big spot, but I think just about this is not deceiving the viewer. Mainly because when I was at the scene, if I just moved a few meters to the left or to the right, then I could have captured this exact image, just as it is here. So I don't feel personally that I'm deceiving the viewer with that spot removal. However, look at this image here. This is Lily Tarn up on Luffrigg Fell in the Lake District, and the image looks exactly how I imagined it in my mind. But I think this image does deceive the viewer. I'd walked around and up a bank a bit so I could shoot down onto that tree, onto that island, without getting the bank in the background of the image, the reflection of the bank on the water. The thing is, I couldn't get high enough or far enough away to isolate the island and the tree in the way that I wanted. So this is the real image, unedited. And you can see the bank and the bank at the top and the bottom, it just doesn't work quite as well. So what I've done is use the content aware fill to remove that bank at the top and bottom. And I think that goes beyond the line. I think this is now deceiving the viewer, even though I'm now telling you, so I'm not essentially. But for me, that image as a standalone image, although I love the look of it, just doesn't, for me, just doesn't work quite as well, because it would have been impossible to shoot this image as I'm showing it to you here. So like I said, it's a complicated issue, it's a very fine line, and yes, I don't think there is any such thing as cheating. I love composite images, I love manipulated images, but there is intent and deception to consider. I don't want to be deceived as the viewer of an image, and I'm trying really hard not to deceive you as the viewer as well. So yeah, more questions than answers, but I think it's just a really interesting topic to discuss.